you very much. Very glad to be here. Thanks for being here. So we have an amazing panel today to talk about AI in energy, in education, in sustainability, and the impact of ecosystems, and what. But there's no better place than the UAE and Dubai to talk about this topic. So I'm really pleased today to announce this talk series that's Powered by AI, which is a series of conferences we launched more than a year ago back in Paris to talk about AI and its role in the journey of sustainability of organizations and territories around the world. We've had tremendous following in this talk series, and I'm really pleased to have the first international edition here in Dubai today. So we are going to co-moderate this event today with Carol, who is responsible for immersive learning at INSEAD. I'm just going to introduce the rest of the panel, and thanks.
Thank you, Mihir. And thank you to all our panelists for being here. So I think we have been all very well introduced by our colleague, but today with us we have Peter Zensky, Professor of Strategy at INSEAD, and also founding CEO of Innovators, an AI training company for executive education. We have Marina Garcia March, sorry, CEO of ICAI, an AI-led company that develops proposals for strategy consulting firms. And with us, Mo Abedat, digital and AI strategy leader, formerly CEO for Aramex and a consultant for the Jordan's government. And Hassan Dayoub, AI product manager at Address, AI company based in Abu Dhabi in the real estate sector. So today we will have three key themes, and the first one will look at how ecosystems and governance can strike the right balance between innovation and regulation. And then we will dive into education, talent, and cultural readiness. And finally, we will explore AI's real-world impact across sectors like energy, like real estate, and logistics, with a focus on sustainability. So, welcome to all of you and us. And let's kick off with our first theme, ecosystem and governance. And I think my first question will go to you, Mo. Since you've advised national governments and helped design AI strategies in Jordan and beyond, how do you think as countries and cooperation balance governance and innovation and centralization versus decentralization, so regulation enables rather than stifles progress?
Thank you, Carol. Great to be here. So there's a lot of parallels between my experience as a CTO in Aramex with big multinational, 65 countries plus, and then working as an advisor in the government. I always say that the government, when you're looking at it as a whole, is just a big corporation. Also has the same problems as a multinational. The key theme in both of my experiences that I started with was that there's a big drive towards centralization, because when you have a scale that's massive, whether it's a country or whether it's a multinational, cost is a big concern, efficiency is a big concern, and centralizing gave them the ability to kind of control that cost, which came at the cost of stifling innovation at the edges, or I call it at the front lines. So when you take a company like Aramex at the beginning, when I looked at that situation, the biggest thing that I wanted to see after looking at a few countries is that there is a lot of innovation that's happening that's regional specific or country specific, right? And it's hard to kind of get the speed of innovation that they need to compete in their own markets with the centralization model coming back to corporate saying, listen, we need your help to do this, etc. So in both situations, we decided to kind of take the approach of democratizing innovation, saying, okay, well, how do you enable people to go at the fast speed of innovation at the front end, but without, let's say, sinking a big cost on a company or on unforeseen costs? So the model that's worked both in the government and in multinationals is taking a decision on key foundational, centralization of key foundational elements, such as infrastructure, such as contracts, such as anything that you want to take the burden, the administrative burden away from these frontliners, so that it has the benefit of the volume of contract values and reductions and discounts, but then allow them the tools to execute at the speed with a very lean governance model, so that not every innovation is tackled that way. Now, in AI, in the government in particular, what we said is completely high level. We said infrastructure centralized at a government, central government level, data access is going to be open between all the entities. Go ahead and innovate, and we're going to ask every ministry to give us a simple KPI for the first year of how many use cases that you have applied. We didn't dictate what use cases, we just said, listen, we've given you the tools centrally, go out and innovate and tell us how you're going to benefit everyone else. So that's kind of a starting. A hybrid, to summarize this, a hybrid is a necessity. You can't go just one extreme versus the other.
So the metric is interesting. For example, just to take the example of what happened at Engie in terms of maturity levels in sharing data, for instance, we started with a KPI which was the volume of data, which is not a very good KPI if you want to think about it, because what do you make of that data, right? So I think the next step is the use case, but I think what we're struggling with is impact and value creation, right? How would you, anybody here, how would you think about this KPI? How would you optimize for that?
So we started with the basics first, and I'll hand it over to my colleagues, but we wanted to kind of get the awareness of what, and that's part of the educational part of what AI is. We said, listen, we've got the licenses for, let's say, the infrastructure, the tools that they needed to go with, start working with it, so that the next iteration of their maturity, and what I did actually as well as that map out a maturity model where level 1, you're experimenting, level 2, you're bringing value to that experimentation, and so on. But we took baby steps because education is very important. I'm sure we're going to touch on this. Not everyone was understanding what am I going to do with these tools, but you're giving me a lot of value here centrally, but how am I going to use them? What are you expecting from me? Am I in trouble if I don't do something amazing? Right? I'll give it to my colleagues to add to that, I'm sure.
Just to connect it to the education theme, obviously we know the value comes when you decentralize. If you get the tools with the people who know the business, that's when you hopefully unlock the value, but the issue is early on you don't have the capability there, and so often you've got to, go through that path where you start more centralized. And again, we've just seen too many examples where people are experimenting but not scaling. And again, the value in tech comes from scaling, and it turns out to be really complicated to scale in complex corporates.
Yes, what I have seen in my experience, notably in the government here in UAE, like maybe just to give some examples of what an implementation of what we're saying may mean. Like the government of Abu Dhabi, for example, what it has done is it has created first the institutions, right? And after that, these institutions have created the building blocks, and then the actual implementation for each sector has been accredited to the direct department or ministry related to that. So what I've seen in terms of, and more specifically on energy, is that in terms of KPIs, there haven't been, at this point in time, transversal KPIs specific to AI. There has been spending topics, there has been the direction to create a directorate in each ministry, but right now the KPIs have been led to each department, each ministry, to dictate for their specific sector, for example in energy, which will be a lot about optimization of the grid and optimization of the generation and dispatching, meaning optimizing the utilization of the different power plants, but it has been left to the ministry.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, it's super interesting topic, to be honest, especially when it came to KPI, because, I mean, every time the leadership will come to you, they'll tell you, hey, this is my company, make me happy. So that means we need to dig deeper and understand the problem from multiple verticals to see what is the root causes, how I'm gonna make you happier. Is it like by reducing costs, increasing the profitability, and so on? And each approach of these will require me to understand the current situation. So I can't improve something without measuring, So, for example, if you want to optimize the spending, which is something similar to stuff that we are currently doing at our company, you need to, to work on multiple verticals like team and their capabilities, the processes, internal processes that we have, and the technology itself. Maybe the easiest one will be like the technology, because everyone will go to the social media, see some numbers, then they're gonna tell you, let's use this tool. But then, I don't know, maybe we're not ready. Maybe this tool will require us to collect some data that we don't have. Maybe our team will not be able to change the process super fast. So that will open a discussion over the real KPIs that should be prioritized here. And sometimes it's going to open some critical questions like maybe the transparency level inside the company that we have. There's too many alignments also that should be done. About what I found when it comes to AI, the alignment means more of like 80% educates me and 20% align to me. Because as I've mentioned, they are experts here, not the leadership team. So yeah, this is what maybe add multiple verticals to the complexity equation for these type of tasks.
Just to conclude on the KPI side, I think we've seen that, of course, there are financial KPIs, return on investment, that are needed to track progress. Some other kind of quantitative KPIs around sustainability, what we called the return on carbon emissions, is a solution that we're developing in terms of AI model, consuming less than what we're helping our customers or ourselves reduce in terms of carbon emissions. But there's also some intangible metrics that we need to look at, and I think at the end of the day, for some long-standing AI solutions that are trying to solve complex problems, intractable problems, I think we need to also make a leap of faith. And I think that's based on education, based on understanding what AI could potentially bring and sort of imagining ourselves in the future. And that's sort of a new management layer that comes on top of what exists.
Thank you. So we go to education and talent section now, and I think we can touch base with the first question to Peter. Since AI is reshaping learning worldwide and from corporate upskilling to immersive classrooms, how do you think AI make people better and not obsolete because it's evolving at such a fast pace, and how do cultural contexts change adoption?
So, I spent 10 years as Dean of Innovation at INSEAD. I'm super passionate about using technology to improve education, but I have to be realistic. Traditionally, it's slow going, right? So education, it's a little bit like healthcare or even government. It's hard to get adoption. However, one reason I'm diving into the sector right now is I've never seen such a great moment to do ed tech. Two reasons. One is the needs are huge. Like all of the change and disruption that's coming across sectors and functions is going to put huge stress on the labor market and people. And if we don't help people upskill faster, it's going to be even more stressful for humanity. And then the second thing is this technology is an amazing fit with education, right? Just this exercise, I'm going to predict the next word, means it's basically had to ingest all of this knowledge and the ability to apply it. So like in my field, it knows what a complement, it knows what a substitute is. And if I say, hey, what's a substitute for a banana? It knows that too. And so it's going to be very good at educating people. And we know that the best way to educate humans is two things. One is through individual tutoring. Why do your parents matter so much in your life? Because there are very few people who are going to sit and spend hours and hours talking and educating you. And just tutoring, individual tutoring hasn't been economical until now. And so if we can find ways to transform education to bring more of that in, we can get a tremendous impact. And then the other piece is humans learn through experience, right? So we need to try things. Otherwise, watching a video is not good enough training data for humans if we don't actually implement it. And again, one of the super exciting things about AI is you can build the most amazing learning simulations. You can have people have incredibly challenging conversations, give them detailed feedback, and really hopefully speed this capability development in a way that could help reduce some of the stress and anxiety on organizations, on people. So it's a great moment.
Thank you, Chris. If I may add to this, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but this is an important question. Do you remember the day when ChatGPT came out? It's kind of like a historical event, right? So I remember the day very dearly. In my life, it was a regular, executive committee meeting, and a few of the guys, the nanotech guys that come in, and the look of fear on their faces is something that I'll never forget. They were literally like as if alien invasion has happened and we're losing business, the stock's gonna go down. But this is the moment that kind of motivated me, as Professor Peter said, is the kind of endeavor to teach and educate people that we cross paths with as much as possible. It's not an era of fear that we're in. It's an era of extreme excitement. I don't think anything's been this exciting for a while to be in. So that's very important, is that we have to be able to kind of continue, especially the ones in the field that understand it, to continue to educate others around it, simplify it. You have the tools to simplify things now, thanks to AI, but simplify it as much as possible. And then the other part that's really, I've seen it from a personal perspective, and I see it with my children, is that the days of, oh, well, my son doesn't understand the topic because it wasn't explained correctly. Well, feed it to ChatGPT, and you have your tutor or study mode. Just watching that, it kind of blows my mind. So it's an exciting evolution for education and the emphasis of it as well.
Marina, just to follow up on what I was saying, you're developing a company now that's helping consulting firms to make their proposals, which is a task that humans used to do before. How do you see that shift in adopting these tools compared to the workforce that is available to do that?
I think, honestly, it's one of the most interesting shifts I've seen, like, in the way we work. Like, for context, I've been working for 9 years in strategy consulting, which is a very corporate style type of job, right? We use PowerPoints, we use old school processes, if you know what that means, and every day, like, you spend a long time just to fix how the boxes are. So when I started developing the proof of concept for the solution, and I started showing it to my colleagues, I was like, okay, it's very basic, I don't know what they're gonna think. Excitement, I've never seen I have never seen them so excited, and I can imagine things like this happens with all sorts of tools, because suddenly it's like, we all realized that in our day-to-day work, there were so many tasks that were predating maybe 50, 60, 70% of our time, and they were not really value added, or we were researching in Google and we couldn't find exactly what we wanted. So when someone realized that, well, actually, I can have a first version of this, download it, and then fine-tune it, really put my brain to the small things that matter and will make the difference. I think that's what really, really struck. And I think now it's gonna be about when the pain of doing something is smaller than the pain of getting used to something new, then you change. And that's what's gonna drive the learning and the change in our habits. Like the realization that learning something new, it's gonna make our life better.
I think what's really interesting to me, being part of a large organization, is the fact that, like you're saying, we're at the moment there's tremendous development in the technology, but what we're really witnessing is the change in adoption, and the way we change in how we work and do things, workflows and processes. And one of the things I'm noticing is that we're still at the stage where we're improving individual productivity through tools like Copilot, etc. We're starting to think about improvements in workflows and processes, but we're still optimizing processes in the way that they were always done. So for example, email responding automatically. At some point we'll have two emails talking to each other, but what's the end goal? And rethinking these processes from the ground up is still something that's a bit elusive. We don't know what the target is. And in terms of education, it makes us think about what are we trying to optimize for? If we're still judging kids on essay writing, for example, that is taken over by LLMs and AI. So what are the things we need to teach? What's the objectives? And what are the things we need to test for? I think that's a big question. And maybe Carol, because you work in experiential immersive learning, what are your learnings from that in terms of if you look at it from an empathetic and cultural perspective?
I think, well, at INSEAD we have an immersive learning, so we develop pedagogical tools to teach students. And actually, those tools are used by faculty, they do not replace a professor. And yes, empathy is a key component on how you learn, but also action. When you become active in your learning, the knowledge will better sink into the brain. So what we believe and what we do is that we ask our students to be active in what they do, and thanks to AI also, we now use this technology to make them talk also to AI bots that are trained to be so our students know how to manage strategic challenges or to negotiate all of this, of course, with the help of a professor, because the purpose is not to replace the human once again, but to augment and to learn faster and ensure that the knowledge will stick better to the brain.
So from all your perspectives, from academia, private startups and companies to governments, how do you see the future of skill building? What are the gaps, and what do you think we should address, both from the perspective of learners, but also in terms of companies and organizations and governments? What are the things that we need to build for capacity building?
I think first principle thinking could be really helpful in the situation, because in a way or another we are reinventing multiple things, so the trio of output, outcome, impact could be really helpful in these cases. So we need to reconsider our companies from the top down or bottom up, if we want, to understand what is the desired impact, how this could be translated into outcomes. Then we're gonna go back to the outputs to work on this stuff. And this will help us to clarify also the root causes. So for example, let's say the development or these agentic coding tools. I mean, yes, it's a new thing, but let's go back 30 years. I think previously we've been coding on the Notepad, and currently we are using the 3 years back, before the AI thingy, we've been doing coding with assistants and autocompletes. If we're going to compare the productivity, it's going to be 20, 30 times, and we still have software engineers as a growing indicator in the market. So the stuff that's actually changed right now is the core motivator for this change is actually the knowledge itself. So you spoke about what actually we need to change. I believe the first thing we need to change is how we see knowledge. Every time we go to a company trying to enhance it from any point, any touch point, we are embedding, especially by using these AI tools, we are embedding a bit of knowledge to this equation. So when we have 30, 50, 60% of this transformation, so should we consider the company as a human? Because we know it has an identity, it has a bank account, it can go to the market, buy, sell, etc. Now it can think. And when we speak about thinking, I mean the source of this knowledge is we, humans. These machines, these machine learning models is only like a pattern recognition systems. And our minds generated these patterns. So the limitation for these machines will be our knowledge. We as a human will be the bottleneck. Till these systems will be able to, innovate their patterns in a way that will not be predicted by us as a human. So I think that in terms of skills and gaps, I believe that we have to change the mindset itself. We need to reconsider how we do business in the market. We need to understand what is the current relationship between us and the businesses. Then we can speak about the futuristic stuff, because as I've mentioned, we have 30 times improvement in terms of coding in comparison with the previous time. But if you spoke about this concept with any company right now, they'll speak like, okay, are you telling that maybe I'm gonna cut the spending by 90%? Or should I expect more products or features to be shipped to the market? We don't know, because we should back to the basics. We should go to the problem set that we have. What are the problems in the market? And this actually will help us to decide over the learning and practice. What's going to happen based on the needs. So first we need to define the needs, then we're going to maybe be more clear with our plans and objectives in terms of how we're going to upskill humanity. And I hope that AI will not reach a point where they're going to start creating their patterns, because I think it's going to be a different universe.
If I may add here, I think one thing that I see is that we're in an era of advanced automation. People may or may not like that, but we were able to automate a lot more knowledge, a lot more things that we weren't able to do with the previous tools when we talk about robotic process automations, etc. So it's an advanced resource, an advanced tool that we have. We need to treat it still and learn the lessons of failure from classic digital transformation and apply it to what we're doing with AI as well. Right? It's not a silver bullet. You know? Just like any other tech, I've seen a lot of companies where we spend millions on tech, throw it at a problem. This is a classic problem where you buy a multi-million-dollar ERP and you're still doing your budgeting and forecasting in Excel. So you can't just throw things at it. You don't throw the latest model, the latest data. There's a lot of basics that we can learn from the classic success and failure transformation to apply to this new era that's unlocking more tools, more automation of knowledge, and faster speed as well. And ultimately as well, foundationally, we forget about this. It's talked about a lot. Data cannot be overlooked as well. Because as we say, tech, garbage in, garbage out. If you're going to build a big model, the foundation is flawed, you're not going to get much. And there was an MIT report, I think, recently about the percentage of failures, which, to my surprise, you expected that it to be a high percent failure in digital transformation, but even higher because of how much they spent on these projects as well. So that's my 2 cents on that.
So, Peter, INSEAD has campuses in the US, in France, in the Middle East, in Singapore. How do you think about the cultural aspect of that? That's one question. And also the balance between scaling, like you mentioned, for the impact of technology to be realized, we need to scale. And also the fact that we can and should, with AI, customize tutoring to individuals. So how do these go hand in hand? So just to set the cultural question in context, most of us here know about the trolley problem, which is this theoretical problem about AI. And there was this study a few years ago by MIT that was reported in MIT Technology Review about the answer, like do you shift the lever to kill one person versus 5 people. And interestingly, the response was not universal, but depended on the cultural background, the country of origin, or the way that people thought about the problem. It's not universal. People don't think alike. So a lot of these technologies carry some sort of bias based on the data, but also on the design itself for the models. So yeah, how do you think about culture, and how do you think about scaling versus customization?
Okay, let me do the first one. Again, it's a little bit what are the key success factors that are going to play out culturally? And I would completely agree that for now there's a complex dance, human and machines, and leadership is going to be important. And you can think about these different regions have different models of leadership, and a certain level of top-down commitment is going to be important to move an organization. But the other thing is I completely agree that people who didn't learn the lessons from digital are going to painfully relearn it. The number of organizations today that's like, oh, the CEO says we need an AI strategy and everyone is scrambling. This is like digital 101. Start with the needs and not with the technology. And people are recreating that so badly. So again, when you think about regions, there are certain places that are better at, on the one hand, getting top down and movement, but at the other hand, getting the people who know the business to also be comfortable with the technology and curious. And again, I'm not going to name regions on any of this, but that's how I would think about it. Customization versus centralization. Again, from the work I'm doing, first of all, this is also a great technology to get your hands dirty, right? So it's not, for all we talk about deep tech, there's just a lot of trial and error and figuring it out. And my experience is this is a great tech, at least in education, this is a great technology for localizing, right? So you can build very general systems, and then the system will not only translate, but like even in my world, it's like, oh, this role play is going to be with a guy running a Hong Kong manufacturer. No, this is with someone running Carrefour in Abu Dhabi. It flows really well. So I do feel it is breaking some of those trade-offs that we saw before, and that's one of the things we need to do.
Thank you, Peter. And so now we know that we with people and learning at heart of transformation. Let's now look at how AI is driving real-world impact across industries. And so now I have a dilemma. How can AI accelerate sustainability and efficiency without worsening the world's energy footprint? And maybe Marina, you can take this one on, since you have been advising on AI strategies in the energy sector.
Why everyone is laughing. So I would say, first of all, I don't have the ultimate answer to that question. If I had, probably I wouldn't be here now. But I can tell, the first thing I would ask the audience and everyone to think about is name the problem, right? From the energy perspective, which is the one that I've been more involved on, I think the problem comes from three areas. People think it's only about generation. That's one part of it, but not all of it. One part, yes, generation. What's the problem? Right now we have around 52 gigawatts of data servers that a part of it, 20% probably, 10 gigawatts is dedicated to AI. Let me put some perspective to that. You can imagine 1 gigawatt, that's what more or less one average city in the world consumes in a year. Let that sink in. Then we are expecting in the next 5 years that to raise to 130 gigawatts. So imagine we are gonna be consuming 100 more cities in the world just for topics of AI. What does it mean for energy? It means, guys, we need to start planning. A plant takes 5 years in average to build. If it's nuclear, 10 to 15. We are late. So that's one of the big enemies. I think that here you may have a better answer for that, but there's a lot of effort on efficiency, on improving how the use of power plants is optimized. Many of that, do I think it's gonna get us where we want to get? No, I don't think it's a solution. But it will improve a bit. Second problem, people are not so aware of it, is about the transmission, the distribution lines. So you have to think about it if you ask me to carry 30 kilograms, okay, maybe I can cross the venue with that. If you multiply that times 10, I'm really sorry. I may not be able to do that. So that's the second big problem. And I think that's very serious for this region, because if you think about it, here in summer times, we consume times 3 what we are consuming in winter times, because I see and all this additional consumption that we need. So that's the second big problem. I think the biggest solution for that is going to be about captive generation, meaning generation being next to the plants. So we are talking about a small nuclear generations, it's called SMRs. We are talking about small solar plants next to the industries. That's going to help. But again, no perfect solution. Third big enemy, the cooling. You have to imagine that every 10, 15 of your prompts in ChatGPT, it's like a small half a liter bottle of water in cooling, which is, multiply that's only 15, I do more than 15 prompts per day, I don't know about you. Yeah, exactly. We don't think as much. So that's going to be the next problem, which is what are the solutions? So a lot of different investigations happening on the field. Again, I think maybe you know more. Optimization of the microchips, 30% more efficient. They produce less heat. Then development of underwater data centers, etc. I personally think that that's a big elephant in the room. We're going to find small solutions, but in the short term, we are not going to find a big solution. I think that there has to be a push for research, optimization of this, because we are not going back anytime soon. We are not going to stop using AI. That's going to be all.
If I may add to this, Marina, thank you for all the water analogies. That's what I keep in mind whenever I'm running something with this. Like, how much water am I consuming? I wish I could drink that much. But the other part, so the counterpart as well, is that the evolution, the research is very heavy on optimizing models for efficiency as well. And something, we talked about this briefly, but it's worth noting here, there's advancements that are happening across the world, in France, in the UK, in the US, but even in Abu Dhabi here. This kind of went through as no news, but it should be known, but one of the most advanced models called K2 Think was just born at Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed University. And it was all about efficiency. I mean, yes, it has, like from a parameter size, it's huge, but it has enough to power a lot of the use cases that we need, right? So, plus it's running efficient. So the good news is that to counter the energy drain, there is research on optimization. We have to remember that neural networks, the foundation of where we are today, started very heavy, and then we went into convolutional networks where they kind of took a different approach, and then we went to recurrent networks and take a different approach. So this evolution is never going to stop anytime. So that's the one point. And then the other point, this era that we're in really reminds me, and I might be dating myself, of how we went from mainframe to mobile phone, from computing power, right? So eventually we're going to have pre-trained models that are super efficient, that can run with a lot of the pre-training you need for your day-to-day on your phone. It's a matter of time that we get to the scale. So there's hope, there's a lot of effort going towards it, but in the meantime, the rate that it's accelerating, we need solutions faster. And it could be just simple in front of us at this point. So go ahead, Professor.
Well, it's an interesting moment because we have so many trends interacting, right? So, and then this one, I hope you're right about the breakthroughs because the macro environment is pretty poor, right? It would be much better if we weren't pulling back on sustainability and there were carbon taxes that were driving this, or even just another one, all the geopolitics, right? It would be much better if we put our data centers where it's cold. But in the current political environment, everybody wants their own data centers, which means you're gonna have a lot of data centers in hot places. So I really think it's sobering, I have to say, working in the space, I can't be really optimistic on this one.
So I think based on what you were saying, Marina, there's no one silver bullet, right? I think it's a combination of small use cases, and I think if you follow the history of AI through machine learning, deep learning, now generative AI, LLMs, agents, etc. I think a lot of the use cases in the industrial sector and in the energy sector in particular use machine learning, use deep learning much more than LLMs because we need to work with quantitative data, time series that comes from IoT or that comes from meteorological data, etc. And a lot of these don't consume as much as LLMs and generative AI. So I think there's already a positive bias there that we can leverage. And I think much like it'll be a combination of use cases using different types of AI for improving performance and improving operational efficacy, we also see that there is an energy mix. I think we all know that since a few years there's no one source of energy that we can all rely on. We need to be resilient. We need to be also mindful of different constraints we may have. For example, France is powered 70% through nuclear energy, but a few years ago, many of the nuclear power plants were stopped for many reasons, maintenance reasons, but also because of the level of water in the rivers was not high enough to cool those power plants. So climate change in itself is playing a role in whether you can use those kinds of energies. So having diverse source of energies that come from wind and from solar and from nuclear and looking at new types of energy sources as well in the mix, I think is the most resilient way to think about it. So it's a combination of things. So that makes a system of systems that is pretty complex, and thinking of it through. So one view that I'm currently building is around thinking of an operating system for energy transition. Is how do you have a modular, adaptive, collaborative system that thinks about things like flexibility. So consumers are becoming producers of energy themselves, both individually. You have solar panels in your home. You have an electric vehicle with a car battery that you can, where you can store energy. So you still depend on the grid, but you're becoming your own actor. You have communities of energy, you have industrials that have on-site utilities, etc. So the whole system is becoming decentralized versus being centralized. So I think this fragmentation can only be tractable computationally if you have AI models, model that.
Maybe Hassan, you can also share some like use cases or like concrete examples on how AI can optimize operational models of, like for example, address of website. For example, optimizing the listing, removing all the fake listings that will also save some data, and maybe you can share your experience.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, internally we have multiple AI initiatives, to be honest. There are more than 20. This is what we've been able to collect within 3 months. And then we started to prioritize them based on the multiple factors, but actually one of them is the impact for the market. So, fake listing for the people who don't know about this concept. So it's more of like when you go to these listing websites like Property Funded by Youth, etc., and you call the agent following the number, and they're gonna tell you, for example, hey, we don't have this unit yet or anymore, so maybe I'll show you other stuff. So this is like a big headache, especially for someone too serious, the one who's looking for an apartment to rent or to buy, for example. So, I mean, I just imagine the trust factor, how it's gonna be. So, I mean, we've built it's a huge product, to be honest. It's more of a platform. I'll keep it to the press. But it's been like a 2 years project. Maybe the last mile was to inspect the listing, to see if people actually listing the properties properly, or maybe there's like some of these fake listing in terms of price, images, and other stuff. So we built an AI agent that's actually trying to check the entire listing through the platforms and to compare it with the data that we have in terms of the permitted listing or not permitted. I believe maybe within 2 months we moved from close to 200K of listing per month only in Abu Dhabi to 27,000K per month. So just imagine how many people will have better life just by having better hit rate in terms of searching, calling the proper people. So this is one of the use cases, to be honest, because the alternative solution will be to follow up these people, speak to them, check the data by yourself, how many people you want to hire to do this. And there is like multiple other contexts, to be honest. Even the smallest products, let's say the chatbots. Every time, I mean, I've saw this multiple times in the region, when they expect to add a chatbot, it's gonna be an extra touch point. It's more of like a channel. But, I mean, the way we could benefit out of this bot, it's hilarious. Because, I mean, it's not only a touch point, it's a connection layer with your experience, with your data, with your knowledge base. So if you position it properly within the customer journey, this could help you to improve too many things. So for example, we've been analyzing the customer center calls to see how many of these calls actually could be answered within single answer. I mean, you throw the question, it's gonna do the response. And we found that more than 200 hours per month of these calls actually spent over this type of questions. And there is the wait, hold on time and other stuff. So you can imagine how many use cases that could be done even within one or single flow for the user. So I still believe that the technology 100% will not be the answer. The ultimate answer could be part of the answering or solution stage, but we need to understand the other stuff. So for example, to build a proper boat, it's not about the technology. You can do this within a couple of minutes. It's about the context. To understand the client context, to understand your internal context, to understand the data that you have, to measure the data. I think we spend 80% of the time trying to understand our data and the internal context that we have before we put this on it as a customer-facing product. And the context thing, I think it's one of the hot topics these days, but it should be every time. because the contextual thinking is really part of the cognitive things that we do as humans. And we've tested multiple scenarios where we've been building these AI solutions and the accuracy rate was super ridiculous. And the reason was because it's completely missing the context. It's go out of context. So now we as a human need to go back to the internal contexts, break it down to sub-context, improve it in a way that could be retrievable for these agents. Then we're gonna go to the next phase of these AI systems, and I believe the impact will be doubled or maybe tripled.
Just one thing that strikes me as this recent conversation is there's no excuse not to know that technology has good sides and bad sides, and I think it's really important that people are, whether it's finding ways to reduce the energy or educate people better. Or even, I just love your example. It's like, yes, AI, digital is great for getting these markets fluid, but when 80% of the listings are fake, there's something to fix. And so I just think collectively, we need to be thinking much more about how we get the upside out of the technology and in little ways limit some of the downsides at this moment.
So I guess it's time to conclude this panel. It's been very wide-ranging, and I think it's really interesting to hold it here in the UAE because it's such a convergence of various cultures, of various innovations, and I think it's a perfect spot for this. Just to synthesize a few of the discussion points, I think in terms of bridging ecosystems, one of the things we discussed is how do we govern with agility? How do we make sure that we empower people and that we include people in their culture and where they're coming from for learning, but also for changing the way we do things. So it's a mindset shift. I think more than metrics and KPIs, it's we think about things differently, and then that will lead to a transformation of industry, transformation of work, transformation of learning, and how we live our lives. So I think there's a lot of threads, and I think the important thing is more, are we asking ourselves the right questions? And I think the goal of all of us in learning and discussing these topics is, figuring out how we think about these topics rather than finding answers which are still very fast moving because the technology is moving and the goalposts are also moving very fast. So I'd like to thank our panelists for this very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for co-moderating with me. And a big thanks to NG, MIT Alumni Club in France, and INSEAD for supporting this, and Sustain Labs Paris for co-hosting us today. Thank you.